Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank you once again for coming to um, cabinet briefing. Um, with It's not a post-cabinet press briefing because cabinet is still in session. But we have promised that we would try to brief you periodically, as I indicated, and therefore this afternoon I've asked the Minister of Health to come and brief us on a number of matters, and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance to also brief us on a number of matters. And myself and the Minister of Foreign Affairs are here as well to anchor any other questions that may be required of us at this point in time. Without further ado, therefore, I'd like to ask Minister Bostic to speak to a number of issues that would have been the subject of cabinet approval um, between this week and last week. Thank you. One of these days we will have a press room that will have these things built in for you so that you don't have to suffer the indignity of trying to push across all these tape recorders, but we're not yet at that stage. Minister Bostic?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would first of all like to start by thanking the staff of the ministry and the Winston Scott Polyclinic, as well as the public of Barbados and you, the media, for helping us to promote the whole idea of the start of the 24-hour service at the Winston Scott Polyclinic. That service has been going since the 1st of July, and from all reports and from my own observations, it is doing extremely well. For the first 2 weeks of the service, the polyclinic saw approximately 1,400 persons, with the majority of persons coming between 8 a.m. and midnight. After midnight, there's been less traffic, around 10 per night, but these numbers we expect to increase as time goes on. And in fact, we anticipate that by the end of the first month, the polyclinic should have seen, the service, the 24-hour service should have seen about 3,000 persons. This, of course, has started to have a positive impact on patient flow at the Accident and Emergency Department of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I would like also to thank the staff of the QEH and the board for their assistance in ensuring that the transition from patients being seen at A&E to the 24-hour service has been going so far quite well. So I think this is something that is positive, the feedback is good, and interacting with people who have used the service, it's all been good, and we in the Ministry of Health and Wellness appreciate that. I would also like to address the issue of the nursing shortage, which we've spoken to before. You would recall that the Prime Minister, during her meetings with the President of Ghana, had indicated that we were going to be pursuing a recruiting exercise in Ghana, having been given the offer to recruit in Ghana by the President of Ghana. And that is going to commence in a few weeks. But prior to the commencement of that, we are doing everything possible to ensure that all those registered nurses on island who have applied to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital or to the health services in general, that we will do everything possible to ensure that they are seen, that they're interviewed, and that they're hired. And that process has been ongoing, especially at the QEH, where some nurses have already been employed. And I am aware that there are about 20 nurses that are going through the process, waiting to be interviewed, nurses and nursing assistants. But the team comprises 6 persons, led by the chair of the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There's also one other board member who happens to be a member of CITUSAT. The director of nursing at the QEH is also a part of the team, as is the director of human resources. And from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the chief nursing officer, and from the Barbados Nursing Council, one person who also happens to be a member of the Barbados Nursing Association. So we've covered all the bases, and this team is ready to go and shall be traveling to Ghana between the 13th and the 26th of August 2019. So that exercise is well underway. We've already made contact through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with authorities in Ghana, and the delegation is expected, first of all, to examine, especially through the Nursing Council representative, the system in Ghana in terms of certification and registration, so that we are all on the same sheet of music, and then the recruiting process will commence, and we expect that we will yield some good fruit from this exercise. The other thing I want to mention here is something that is transformational in a sense. That is that I have taken to Cabinet a draft policy document to guide organ transplantation services in Barbados. And this is very important. This is long in coming. The doctors have been asking for it. It is something that will be very beneficial to those persons who have been experiencing certain difficulties, especially in relation to NCDs. I can say to you that over the last 30 years or so, about 19 transplantations have been done here at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So it's not that we do not have the experience or the expertise, but the availability of donors to donate the organs, that has been a problem. And so this policy, which was approved by Cabinet and has now to go before the Chief Parliamentary Council so that the necessary legislation can be drafted, so that it will go to Parliament and it will become legal, and it will enhance this entire process and make life easier for a number of persons in Barbados. The other matter has to do with a very important decision that was taken by Cabinet, which is the approval of a policy paper, policy document dealing with health economics. What we are doing with the approval of Cabinet is to contract the services of the Health Economics Unit of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, to be able to execute a comprehensive review of all of the services, medical services that are offered within the public medical sector in Barbados. So we will cost every single operation, every single service, which would then allow us to see what the true cost for healthcare in Barbados really is. And using this information, it would facilitate the planning of healthcare in Barbados and also the financing of healthcare in Barbados. And this comes at the heels of the decision taken by Cabinet, which is to create a position for a health finance commissioner for the country, and that position has been filled, and so everything is in place now for us to try and get this done within a period of about 6 months, and then to start the process of developing the healthcare financing within the country. So these are issues that for us are very, very important, and we look forward to executing, that is the ministry, as directed by Cabinet.
If I just may, on that last one, I would have indicated to the country that the big issues next year for us to settle will be health financing and pensions, because how we have governed in the last 50 years cannot be how we govern going forward on what really are the two largest claims on public expenditure: pensions and healthcare costs. And this process, as the Minister has said, for us to be able to cost so every single procedure in the hospital and the polyclinics is the beginning of how we know we're going to be able to afford what we're doing. And very truthfully, we need to see the money that we pay to the hospital not as a subvention, but as a payment for services, because that's exactly what it is. In the same way that the university is a payment for services. But if we don't cost out the services, we can't properly pay for them, or we can't measure performance and productivity. So I don't know if Minister Walcott wants to add anything to that. You good? Mm-hmm. All right. at this stage, rather than pausing, I'll go straight now and ask Minister Strawn to also deal with some announcements that we have to make that become effective next week as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
Basically, this afternoon, I'm going to just elaborate on matters relating to the relaxation of exchange controls in Barbados. But before I do that, let me just give you a little bit of context. Before we came into office last year, investor confidence, business confidence in this country was at pretty much an all-time low. In part, there was significant pressure on the foreign reserves of Barbados, and that was due mainly in part to the indiscipline within the public finances. You would be aware that $50 million was being printed every month to support the salaries of public servants, and the reality is that that created a real problem with respect to the management of our finances, as well as had a significant impact on the foreign exchange position in the country. Having come to office under the leadership of our Prime Minister, we've done some significant work to stabilize the public finances such that it does not create any adverse pressure on the foreign exchange situation. And so therefore, in this environment going forward with respect to the rebuilding consumer confidence, business confidence and investor confidence across the board, we are in a zone where now, having achieved a level of stability in the economy, that we now move to a stage where we want to be able to regulate for growth. And so much of what would have taken place in the past, we are seeking to make sure we make a significant departure from that, such that confidence returns to the economy. And as you know, the Prime Minister would have announced earlier this year in the budget that there would be some relaxation with respect to matters related to foreign exchange. Over the last few years, persons have been doing some interesting things with respect to foreign exchange, and to the extent that we want to rebuild confidence in the system, we are assured at the moment that government's discipline will not in the near future have any significant impact on the foreign exchange position in the country, but that we are now regulating now in an environment where we want to encourage growth and to bring and attract foreign exchange into the country. And one of the key initiatives that will take impact from August 1st, as
August
announced,
2nd.
but August 2nd, since August 1st is Emancipation Day, will be that all Barbadians or all residents of Barbados will be allowed to hold foreign currency accounts. Of course, the funds that will be deposited into these foreign exchange, foreign currency accounts cannot be purchased obviously from the local domestic access of foreign exchange. And so therefore, for persons who are doing business and for whom may have investments abroad or what have you, the ability for them to hold or as a safe place with respect to that foreign exchange, they'll be able to do so. In the past, foreign exchange accounts always had 70% surrender value, which meant that whatever money you put in, 70% would have been converted into Barbados dollars, and you only were allowed to keep 30%. We are in the process going to eliminate that surrender value, that surrender amount, as a signal to the country that we want persons to be able to utilize these accounts for the conduct of their business, such that the availability of foreign exchange to transact both personal as well as commercial activity can take place in Barbados with renewed confidence. We would have seen a lot of interesting things taking place as the credit quality, creditworthiness of the country deteriorated, as the foreign exchange deteriorated over the last few years, where persons were making different arrangements. And now that we have provided a measure of stability, rebuilt the reserve position, government's finances have been stabilized, it is now time for the private sector for normal service to resume, and therefore this is seen as part of the effort to be able to do that. By the same token, in the process of doing that, it means that we have also sought to increase the personal allowance with respect to travel facilities for individuals, which was currently at $7,500 annually. That is going to be increased to $20,000 Barbados. with respect to persons
So
wishing
just
to
explain
travel.
again. So previously it was what?
It was $7,500 for
Barbados.
private Barbados dollars for private travel facilities.
Per year.
As you were doing your normal business, that is what you can go into the bank and purchase for your private facilities. No, we are saying now we are going to increase that to 20,000 because as we said, normal service resumes, and therefore we want to be in a position to signal to Barbados that you no longer have to be running about Barbados asking persons if you got for the US or you got this, which has become unfortunately a feature. And the reality is we want to give the citizens the assurance that the conduct of your personal business when you go on holiday or to visit family overseas or for medical treatment or whatever, that access to foreign exchange is there, and therefore it has to be done in an orderly fashion.
I think Ryan, you may have to pause because this is a complex issue, and explain to members of the media and those who are watching that this will be more appropriate for those. Everybody's entitled to hold a foreign exchange account, but not everybody's going to go and hold one at the same time. So that even though, Barry, you might open a foreign exchange account because of necessity, you may not have one immediately, and therefore you may still need then to be subject to the central bank rules, correct? Which
Correct, yeah.
before would have limited you to 7,500 Barbados, which is roughly 3,750 US. We're saying no, we're carrying that up to 20,000 Barbados, which is 10,000 US. And that is more than enough for the majority of Barbadians, especially those who may not open a foreign exchange account. Correct?
So basically, to add to that, as persons are expected to utilize those who earn foreign exchange, and obviously we want to be able to use that for reinvestment purposes, that the first draw for any particular expenditure will be on their, obviously, foreign exchange account for the conduct of their business. But of course, there are always rules of the road with respect to having a system, and therefore, whilst we're not we're eliminating the surrender requirement, of course, as being a part of the system, the pooling of those resources, obviously, as you put your money into any traditional bank account, obviously has to be available in the context of the system for use. And so therefore, the intent here really is to make sure that persons no longer have to be in the shadows in a sense, and in a sense taking a risk of walking around with large amounts of foreign exchange. It will be available for your use, and therefore we want you just to bring some order with respect to how these things are conducted. One of the other features with respect to this, as you know, the foreign exchange fee was introduced about 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, and therefore one of the features of this now is that we're going to cap that foreign exchange fee to $100,000, because for persons obviously who are executing what we call or describe capital transaction sales of properties and those kinds of investments, we want to make sure that it's capped so it doesn't become a disincentive for investment in Barbados. And so these are some of the basic things now that we're just trying to make sure that we give some confidence to all Barbadians, but certainly to all investors, that as we go forward, that we are regulating for an environment which will be conducive to growth. At the moment, there is pretty much a significant number of transactions that take place outside of Barbados because of some of the issues with respect to access to foreign exchange in the past. And therefore, I expect that the practitioners within that space, the lawyers, the accountants and stuff, will be going after that business, given that we have a level of stability now that allows us to be able to do that. And so these regulations are not being done in a static environment, because we anticipate now that as Barbados now seeks to go after business, that we set up our regulatory environment that really will make it conducive for the conduct of that business. On a slightly unrelated matter, you will know that earlier this year we passed in the Parliament the Public Finance Management Bill, which seeks to bring significant order to the entire management of public finances in Barbados, both at the central government level as well as the state-owned enterprises. And so therefore that bill pretty much sets out the responsibilities for certainly the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance, as well as the various ministers in charge of the state-owned enterprises, along with the permanent secretaries, the board of directors, with respect to the responsibilities, with respect to the management of the public finances. And therefore that bill is going to be proclaimed on July 29th. And there's a number of sections that will come on stream over the course of the next few months. And therefore, as part of our path to bringing a greater level of accountability with respect to the spending of the taxpayers' money, the proclamation of this bill will then start to enforce some of the discipline that clearly was not there, that led to a situation where we found ourselves having to restructure our debt, where our reserve and certainly our foreign exchange, in terms of the PEG, was at risk. And so therefore,
Simplify it, my brother.
what we are suggesting here
Forget
is
about the peg and explain to people what you mean.
the 2 to 1, as we all say. The reality is that it is the discipline of government, and I think when we look at the history of Barbados and our engagement with the International Monetary Fund, we've never had balance of payments issues in terms of any threat to the PEG or the 2 to 1 that has emanated from any external event, but more so from the indiscipline of government. And so therefore the public finance bill and the proclamation of that, and the responsibility of all the various stakeholders to make sure that the public finances are managed in a way that is consistent with maintaining that 2 to 1, which we all know, and we all appreciate that the discipline that's required to be able to maintain that. The public finance management bill is part of the mechanism of bringing back some greater accountability, but also to give Barbadians, in a sense, a safeguard that we can go about managing the country's affairs as it relates to the access to foreign exchange, the attraction of investment in the country, because once government is disciplined, then it means then that ordinary citizens, ordinary businesses can go about their activities without fear of any significant downside. So with that, I hand over to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. The last thing that I'd like to address before taking any questions, when we launched or renamed the Spring Garden Highway to the Mighty Griner Highway, I would have indicated to the country that we were contemplating certain things that I would carry to Cabinet. Cabinet last week agreed to the framework for the establishment of a new national honour, this one to be established by Act of Parliament and not by letters patent by Her Majesty. But this one would be the Freedom of Barbados, which would be after the National Hero of Barbados, which is in a class of its own. It would be the highest national award at the same level as the Knight or Dame of St. Andrew, which is the highest local award. And we agreed that similarly, a person can opt for either therefore the Knight or Dame of St. Andrew or the Freedom of Barbados. They would be treated at the same level. The Freedom of Barbados would be referred to, person who received that honor would be referred to as the most honorable, that there would be no more, as happens now, of 3 at the national level, whether Knight or Dame of St. Andrew or Freedom of Barbados, but then 2 honorary ones can be awarded every year. A country on occasion has reason to award honorary honors at the very highest level, and those are invariably to people who are not resident here, but who by their living or their actions have added value to our national condition. And that the table of precedents would be amended. The Chief Parliamentary Council is already drafting the bill, and I would expect that it would go to Parliament within the next week or so. Similarly, we have today have before us a paper on the Pride of Barbados Parish Awards, and we took a decision with respect to We Gathering 2020 some months ago, and we launched it in Parliament Yard, as you know. And We Gathering starts next year in January in St. Lucie and goes right down to November in St. Michael, and then from the 30th of November to the 31st of December is the national celebration for the entire country. the government is of the view that in every parish there are people who by their living have brought credit to their parish and to this nation, and that we need, as we focus the limelight of the country and the world on that particular parish, to pay obeisance and to honor those persons. And those recommendations ought to come from the people. And whether it is the people of the parish, which we believe specifically are well placed to do so, or generally across the nation, because you may have gone to school in St. Lucie and therefore you know the contribution that this particular person has made to the lives of hundreds or thousands of school children in terms of making sure that they were on the right path and making sure that they were taken care of, etc. There are all kinds of contributions that people will make. But we believe that by statute as well, we should put in place, therefore, the Pride of Barbados, and you would open brackets, St. Michael Award, the Pride of Barbados St. Lucie Award, the Pride of Barbados Christchurch Award, the Pride of Barbados St. Thomas Award. So depending on the particular parish that is involved, it would be the Pride of Barbados, that particular award. And that while next year we will honor both those living in Barbados as well as those who are visiting back, because there are a number of people, for example, from that particular parish who may have added value even though they're overseas. So that there will be a category for those in the diaspora but who still add back value to the parish, okay, or have added value to the community in which they are functioning in the diaspora. So that there will be a special category for next year, and that after 2020 we would like to continue with these parish-based awards, because who are we really honoring? We're honoring the heroes of the parish, and that thereafter those should be issued on the 28th of April as National Heroes Day for the top 3 persons in each parish, 2 coming from within and 1 from the diaspora. And once again, who are the people recommending? The public. And it will come to the Honours Committee, and obviously there will be an assessment done. So from 2021 it will be 3 per parish, but next year it'll probably be, I think the numbers were 15 or 20, I think it was 20, 10 and 10. 10 from the diaspora, 10 from local, but no more than. It doesn't mean that you will issue 20, but no more than, because there's some parishes like St. Michael, for example, that are highly populous, or Christchurch, and therefore we needed to be able to capture the fact that in this parish of St. Michael you probably have the cumulative amount of what, about 5 or 6 parishes. Okay, so those relate to that. In both instances, and in fact for the national hero, there is in fact no symbol that exists, and I've asked the Cabinet Secretary to advertise and to have Barbadians who want to participate in the next few weeks in a competition as to what the insignia for each of these awards should look like as we go forward. And hopefully Barbadians therefore will get that chance over the next 2-3 weeks, and Cabinet Office will do the advertising for it. Are there any questions? Period. Sorry, Minister. Yeah.
Just briefly though.
Minister is also Minister of the Diaspora.
No, I just wanted to inform the members gathered here in the press that between August the 7th and the 9th, in keeping with for move for the push towards African countries in terms of Ghana, Morocco, but the President Uhuru Kenyatta will be paying an official visit to Barbados from August 7th to 9th. He'll have, of course, be meeting with government officials on the 8th, and the heads of CARICOM of the Eastern and Southern Caribbean have been invited here to meet with him on the morning of the 9th. Just to let you all know that President Kenyatta will be paying an official visit to Barbados as part. You've heard me speak in the past about the movement and the reaching out to Africa and the prospects of doing greater trade and with African countries. Just to inform you of that.
Thank you. Any questions?
Question for Minister Boston.
Go ahead.
Barry Allen from the Nation. Minister, in the last 5 or 6 months, there have been quite a few occasions where chronic disease sufferers in Barbados have been to polyclinics, and for whatever reason, certain drugs, metformin, its derivative, glyformin, and some other medicines have not been available. And some of them cannot afford to go to private pharmacies and purchase these medicines. How confident are you we can finally find a framework where these acute shortages do not affect these chronic disease sufferers as they have a lot in the last few months?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we had a recent situation where that was drawn to my attention, and I have had a meeting with the major stakeholders in this regard, including the Barbados Drug Service, and we've been able to identify at least 2 areas that we will certainly improve on going forward to ensure that this is minimized, if not eliminated. And I'm quite confident that going forward we will be able to satisfy the demand. However, there are occasions where the manufacturers have not been able to deliver to the distributors on time, and when we are aware of these situations, then we correct the situation by allowing the brand drugs, the brand name drugs, to be used during the period, and that is something that we would normally take to cabinet for approval, because as you can appreciate, we operate on the drug formulary, and the decision was taken, a policy decision, to move to generics, because that is something that is happening across the globe, and from a financial point of view that makes sense. I am confident in the generics. I myself use generics, but at times, yes, we do have some shortages, and that is the way that we've been able to deal with these shortages. But 1 or 2 instances have occurred where we've had some issues in terms of dealing with the distributors, and I think we're going to be able now to put something in place to ensure that we do not repeat that.
I can assure you that it's not for lack of funds.
No.
Hi, good afternoon, Minister Bostic, Randy Bennett, Barbados today. Could you give us an update on the position of Dr. Dexter James? This is several months now that he's been on sick leave. I know during the budget, the chairman of the hospital had also revealed that government was taking steps to retain a lawyer to look at the contract, Dr. James's contract, and steps going forward. So just wanted to update on that situation.
I'm going to exercise my prerogative to speak, because I don't know that Minister Bostic can speak on either what the lawyer has advised or hasn't advised, especially since the person, and you have agreed that the person is still on sick leave. In fact, he's been on sick leave for how long now?
Since the estimates.
Since the estimates debate? That's what, March?
The day after this.
It was the day after the estimates? I can't remember. So that's April, May, June, July, and part of March. That's about 4.5, 5 months. So I would prefer that Minister Bostic insulates himself from answering that question, because the only body who can speak to the sick leave is either Dr. James himself or his doctor.
Another question for Minister Bostic, just a follow-up question. Seeing that you would have created the opportunity for the 20 nurses to be interviewed here, that only fills 20 vacancies. So when the team goes off to Ghana, can you give us a better indication of what approximation, what numbers you're looking at from Ghana, and if by looking at Ghana, we're going to remove ourselves from looking at other countries like the Philippines, etc., in terms of importation of nursing staff?
Right. Let me say first of all that if we had the numbers in Barbados, Barbadians or persons who reside here, we would not have to go anywhere at all. So that's a given. We considered looking within the region, and I believe that there's at least one country that has excess capacity. What we decided that we were not going to do was to try to recruit nurses from our neighboring countries that are in the same position as we are. That would not be prudent, and that would not be, we would not be operating as good neighbors. So initially, we are looking to recruit about 78 persons initially. Not that we are not going to interview several more, but that is the initial numbers that we're looking at. We will come back and see how that works, because obviously there's some things that have to be put in place for those nurses, accommodation and all that. They would have to settle in, and as long as we are then able to satisfy ourselves that all is well, and then we also have to make a request to the Ministry of the Public Service, because we are requesting additional positions that do not exist at the moment. So we cannot really go beyond that capacity in the first instance.
Ryan Broom, CBC News. Minister Strong, is there a minimum balance for the foreign currency accounts?
Well, normally when one opens a bank account, the commercial institution would normally determine what that would be. We haven't contemplated stipulating any minimum balance, simply because the delegated authority with respect to exchange control flows from the minister to the central bank to the authorized dealers. So the dealers will determine, which is the commercial banks will determine, in a sense, what are the conditions with respect to balances. But suffice it to say, given that part of the way forward is to also be able to allow for some lending in foreign currency as well, then obviously those are conditions that will have to be set by the commercial institution.
What's the short answer?
No.
No.
Well, zero.
Ryan Joseph News. This is a two-part question, both for the Minister of Foreign Affairs and for the Minister of Health. Minister Bostic, I know we've heard a lot about the recent situation in the Congo with regards to Ebola. I know we've beefed up our plan. Could you give us some insight as to what has been done and what we need to be aware of? And as for the goodly Minister Walcott, I know that just next door to Congo we have Rwanda and Burundi. Do we have any concerns, especially given that we have the visa waivers and so on in place?
Okay, as soon as the World Health Organization issued the statement, I convened a meeting of the major stakeholders within the health sector, and I did so first of all because recognizing the fact that I am new relatively in the job. We have a new cabinet, and we have other persons in other positions of importance that would not have been in those positions when we had the outbreak and the declaration between 2014 and 2016. And that really was for me to get an idea as to exactly what the status is. And I'm happy to report that we do not have to start from scratch, because we faced this situation back in 2014, 2016. And so an Ebola protocol document was produced back then, and it is fairly comprehensive. But we have asked all the major players to go back to their respective ministries and departments and look at the protocols and see how we can enhance them to meet requirements in 2019. Apart from that, I have a paper actually before Cabinet today, an information paper to bring Cabinet up to speed. But we've taken some steps at the ports of entry with our port health officers to increase surveillance at those two locations. I think I should take the opportunity to say to the country that there's nothing to worry about at this stage. Barbados is a low value, the threat to Barbados is low at this point in time because the epidemic is confined, generally speaking, to within the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Minister?
As we obviously, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is working in collaboration with the Ministry of Health in terms of the public health measures. As he said, currently Barbados is low risk. There's hardly any in terms of traffic in terms of Rwanda and Burundi to Barbados normally, but obviously we'll be monitoring that. And the main issue here would be in terms of the heightened public health and port health awareness. I know that we've also, thinking ahead, that certainly the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is scheduled for Kigali in Rwanda next year, and that is something that we'll be monitoring closely in terms of participation. But after that, in October, there's a plan UNCTAD 15, and with UNCTAD you would expect a number of persons from various parts of Southern Africa coming to participating, and we've already started putting plans in terms of the need in conjunction with the Ministry of Health of looking at strengthening the public health in terms of numbers and resources. And also, more importantly, we've been thinking about, in some countries you have infrared meters that can detect persons who have fevers as they arrive, as they come through the arrival area. And so we're looking at things like this. But as it stands right now, as the minister said, it is not new to Barbados. We've been through the SARS preparedness, the avian flu, the Ebola, and it's a matter of looking at their protocols and strengthening them and enhancing them, and the repeated training and educating of the public health workers, but also the population. Thank you.
Prime Minister, I'm trying to find out what's the update in terms of Sandals Beaches. Are we finished, or are we still in discussions, or what's the
I have told you that I don't believe in hearsay, correct?
Well, I'm asking.
So there's been no change. They will tell us when they are ready to start. As far as I know, they were doing beach works up until recently. So I don't know that they've stopped. It's just that they haven't started the civil works of the construction, and we will await it. I know that we're engaging with a number of investors across the country, and we will continue to do so. And in fact, we expect, I think the agro-processing plant in St. George will start soon. That's a $28 million facility. We anticipate that the Hyatt will continue. The vesting processes have gone through. We anticipate there will be a new addition to our brand, Royalton, which is out of the Sunwing Group, which is the largest charter group out of the US, and out of Canada, sorry, and the second largest out of the US. And they're hoping that they can start construction subject to regulatory approvals in April next year. And there are a number of other ones in town that I've spoken to already. So suffice it to say that I've learned in this instance of public life that I report progress as we go along, and that I do not purport to speak on behalf of others. For my other and previous job as a lawyer would tell you that is hearsay. So just as I will not speak on behalf of Dr. James's health, I cannot speak on behalf of the planning program of beaches, but suffice it to say that I know that they've been doing the beach works. They have all of the incentives that the last government gave them, and we will await their civil works construction. I think they have the town planning approvals too. Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir.
As Minister of Finance, you were recently named in a lawsuit.
You got me feeling nervous.
Debt restructuring plan. I was wondering if you were concerned that this could lead to...
Not at all. Not at all. I have every confidence in the lawyers acting on behalf of the government, the Attorney General, his advice, and the lawyers acting on behalf of government. Not in the least.
Minister Bostic, final question for you. Hope you don't think I'm bombarding you.
Go right ahead.
I was beginning to think that he suffered from alphabetical limitation. BO means that he must take every BOWL.
At the top of the press conference, you spoke about how glad you were the first phase of the 24/7 service had worked. But there are still some concerns. How satisfied are you that the concerns of the nurses, in conjunction with their representative, the union, how satisfied are you that their concerns are being met? And there have even been cries from the Senate chamber of probable victimization of nurses who may have not wanted to be part of the 24/7 service. What is your comment to that?
Well, firstly, let me say that I don't deal with the probable, I deal with the actual. And I can tell you that there is no such thing as victimization within the polyclinics in that regard, certainly. But the issues that were raised by the nurses and the unions, they were all satisfied even before we opened the 24-hour service. Transportation, safety and security, environmental issues, appointment of nurses, you name it. We have satisfied every requirement that was put to us, and that is why we were able to commence the service on the 1st of July.
In fact, I also want to say that this government has done many things, but one of the things that has pleased my heart the most, and the minister knows it, has been this 24-hour service. You know, we do a lot of large things like saving the dollar, which is huge, but people can't feel it or see it. They would only have known what we have done by realizing that they missed a bullet. You understand? But this here, the opening of the 24-hour polyclinic, and I must tell you, I went down there myself. I didn't leave it for anybody to come with hearsay. And I don't think I've ever received more hugs, more warm emotions than I received on that visit, both in the polyclinic, and I left from there and went to the QEH A&E, which on that first night was still flowing over with people in and out. And to be able to say, look, now that we have this other polyclinic, we need now to manage and send some of the people over there. Because the polyclinic maybe had about 15, 20 people, whereas the hospital would have had about probably 70, 80 people. But the tangible joy and expression, and there were a number of parents there with children, and for them in particular, the environment in there is so much more hospitable to being able to wait, and obviously the waiting times were far less. And I mean, these are the kinds of things that a government is supposed to do, and that's why you were talking about the same estimates meeting with the Ministry of Health, and I raised at that estimates meeting the whole question of the treatment with the cardiovascular matters, and it's something that we are trying to do because there's a distinct difference between how we treat them here and how they're treated overseas, and the results there too. So these are the kinds of things that make a real difference to ordinary people's lives. And that's why every week we try to find out in what way are we making that difference to ordinary people, because we know we're coming from a long way down. But I know with God's help and with the support of the people of Barbados, we can get there. And Jeffrey, I really want to thank you and your ministry and the nurses. And let me just say, on this issue of victimization, because sometimes you got to take it and deconstruct it for people. The nonsense of the allegation of victimization from the Ministry of Health is that it is the Ministry of Public Service that deals with the terms and conditions and contracts of these people. So that, you know, we really got to cease and settle sometimes. And in some instances, when you were hearing that people weren't doing it anymore, it is because the people who had volunteered to do it want to do it at the David Thompson Polyclinic, which is in St. John. And that will come on board hopefully in about another 4 to 6 weeks. But we agreed with the unions that we would do a testing phase, because instead of, we wanted to do both up front, they said no, they want one at a time. We've done it. I would like to bring the same joy and happiness now to the people of St. Philip, St. John, St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. George, And the people from St. Lucie might decide that it is better to come down the coast and go to David Thompson than to come in town to the Winston Scott. But these are the kinds of things that we have been elected to do. And I want to thank all of the people who have stayed the course and realize that ordinary people are grateful for this decision.
Just 2 further questions, Prime Minister.
2? They go from 0 down to a very full cup. Let's go.
I'm wondering if you had any
Let's crop
possible
over.
updates. For one, the issues around the Americans, the disappearance of the Americans, if any updates, and 2, Liat.
No further updates with respect to. I think obviously the jet ski was found. I can tell you that we're trying to have a regulatory framework that is more sturdy than what we have with respect to swimming areas and jet skis. The others will tell you in cabinet that even before this incident, that this is a matter that I have been concerned about. But secondly, with respect to LIAT, I think there's a LIAT board meeting tomorrow, and the Director of Finance and PS International Transport have gone off to that. The matter is still subject to negotiations and discussions. I have said that I'm not going to make a habit of negotiating across the oceans, that the oceans are made to sail on or to fly over, but not to negotiate over. Suffice it to say, however, that obviously they're taking a little longer than we had anticipated, and negotiations either work, in which case they're successful, or they don't work, in which case you revert to the status quo ante. Okay? Thank you very much. And happy crop over. I don't think that we'll have one of these before crop over weekend, or a happy Emancipation Day as well. Charlie, thank you.